I'd like to welcome everyone to call number 70, and I won't be doing notes on ETH Magicians because it's got problems. So this is EOF Implementers Call number 70. I think it's number 70. Today is the 2nd of April, 2025. And here's the agenda. We're going to be focusing on DevNets mostly today. We talk testing, DevNet 0, 1, and coverage reports. Go through the client compiler updates, and then dig into specific details about DevNet 1, DevNet 2, and Post-DevNet 2, including potential new EIPs post-DevNet 2. And this is probably actually in Amsterdam or later. Any other requests for agenda items before we start? All right. Hearing none, let's go into testing. Mario, you want to kick us off?
I've been reviewing a couple of PRs, and most of them either have comments or are merged. And yeah, some interesting PRs with new interesting test scenarios. I think we should include them in DevNet Zero definitely. Um, so should we make a new release? I think soon. Only for DevNet Zero. Yeah, I think we should make a release in the following days. We're planning a product release, so maybe if we release at the same time, we can save ourselves up of making an exclusive EOF release. So maybe that's an option too. But yeah, and other than that, I don't think there's other updates.
Okay. And UF DevNet 1 tests. Anyone from Epsilon want to take that, or should I lead with it?
I have TXCREATE tests in progress, slow but steady. There's a lot of EOF create tests which I'm converting to TXCREATE, and we have been quite creative about the scenarios. And some transform by a common pattern, but some are quite quirky, especially the gas ones, because of 7623, which is a pain. Yeah, that's it, I think, on this.
Okay. And TXCREATE is the only real new feature. Everything else is porting existing tests with the new container format changes, right?
Yeah, I would, for example, taking data 0xFF as an example, the tests were transformed, by just swapping FF and 04 in the bytecodes and in the framework. However, maybe, and I have that on somewhere on a to-do list too, it would be good to make some, I don't know how to call them, like impure tests which test that we have correctly transitioned from one to the other. So just think about scenarios. What would break differently if someone had this, I don't know, mixed up or something?
I
So like
didn't
this
I
is,
didn't catch that. So do you want some parameterization or what did you have in mind for these new scenarios?
maybe not, I don't know, there's scenarios, just a moment of hesitation to think about, what would break if, well, like specifically that what used to be a data section still was done with the 04 in kind byte, right? So just make sure that we have tests that actually make sure that 04 is not a data section anymore. Probably there are tests like that, but I haven't really spent time on looking for these.
There are some tests that test for like section 5, 6, 7, etc. So we
Exactly.
probably
So
just need to make sure that those also include 4 in their list.
yes, along those lines, and also in conversely, we have had FFBD, kind of weird section kind placeholder-y thingy, and it is a data section now. So we need to probably be also careful that we have all the relevant cases still covered.
I think the in this PR, I think it's a draft now, but I already gave it a review. I left some comments specifically on those tests. I saw that we were testing for 0x05 and 0x06. I think I commented that we should use 0x4 and 0x5 for those. And
Good.
also, yeah, sorry.
I was agree. I saw those comments. I think I covered them. Yes, thank you.
All right. All right. Good. Thanks.
Mhm.
Good.
Yeah.
Ben, you had your hand up briefly.
I mean, this comes from trying to implement TXCREATE, but it may affect some of the tests. So we don't have the contract address bytecode in the EIP. So I don't know if that affects the some of the tests you can make.
That's the
What do you
delegate
mean,
checker.
contract address?
EXP
No,
code address.
The contract that's being called for
The creator
TXCREATE.
contract.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to somehow compile it, put it in the spec, and I recommend having also dedicated tests for this behavior in Yeast.
Yeah, I think the address is going to be OXB. It's going to be the next one on the precompile list.
Is it a precompile or is it bytecode?
That's something we need to discuss in ACD. So the plan would be to have a predefined set of bytecode that we would put at a specific address as part of the transition. That's a pre-deploy. That's not something we've done before, but that's something that's being discussed for like the EVMifying the identity compile, is to take the existing precompile and replace it with EVM code. So there is precedent for other things doing this rather than EOF. So we would just also do that. Another alternative is just to say it's a precompile and it acts as though we would use this bytecode and the gas charging is as though we have this bytecode. So it doesn't go in the state tree. So that's some of the details that we should probably work through when we get down to that section. So there's still a bit of design we need to finalize because I don't think ACD quite understands what we're proposing with the pre-deploy.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. It's a different mechanism, right? So normally with system contracts, we pre-deploy them before the fork, but now we need the client to put something in the state at the fork block. So we never tested that. So it's we have to pay careful attention if we're going that route.
Yeah, it's a chicken and
testing
egg
side.
because we need to deploy an EOF container, which is currently banned. So to deploy other EOF containers, we first need this EOF container, which is where it gets tricky.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand the need for it. I just wanted to pinpoint that we have to be careful about testing. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. We'll probably come back to that deeper when we get to the TXCREATE section. All right. One client request that I have for all the clients, if there's a way to generate a coverage report when you run the EOF reference tests, if there's a way to generate that and share that, that would be good. We had a meeting with most of the other internal EF people a few weeks ago. One of the meetings we had was about testing. And one of the things that the testing group really wants to get towards is to use coverage to help us decide how good the tests are. And it's there's steps in this. There's line coverage, and then there's branch coverage, and then there's path coverage. They're not going to stop testing until they get 100% on all of them. But I think we get the biggest returns on line coverage if a key branch is not taken in any way, shape, or form. I almost guarantee you there's a bug. Or maybe there's something with the uniqueness of your client that you may need to figure out how to get unit tests to trip that. Because I know in Besu there's a lot of defense and depth things to trap out underflows and overflows, which are probably unnecessary with EOF, but we have them in there anyway because we share a lot of code with the non-containerized execution. So that execution still needs those. But if we could, get a coverage report on these, I think that would also calm a lot of people's fears that it's, too complex. That the complexity is something we can't handle. If we can show that we've been able to exhaustively test all the code paths, I think that would really calm a lot of people who can be calmed. Okay. Anything else?
If
Go ahead.
one has coverage calculated on the CI, and I have shared that, but maybe not with everybody here.
Okay.
It is close to 100 for the relevant lines. There's some pieces missing.
Okay. They don't have a shuffle, do they? I'll shuffle this next time. Today we'll do this in alphabetical order for client updates. But first, any other tests before we go on to client updates? Cool. So client updates. Let's do alphabetical order. Besu.
Yes, so I think DevNet 1 is implemented, and we have also implemented the pay opcodes for DevNet 2. I think that's pretty much it.
Okay, cool. Anyone from Aragon? Started fuzzing of theirs. They almost instantly found the fuzzer instantly found a bug with the swap and the exchange. So I wrote a new test with that. We weren't, all our tests were symmetric. So if you were doing it from the bottom instead of the top, it looked like it passed. So I added some asymmetric tests. Those were some of the things we're going to get into DevNet 0. If you fuzzed, you're probably fine. Ethereum JS, anything? Anyone? Okay. EVM1.
I think we've got all the DevNet 1 changes, except the creator contract. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. And pay opcode is still not started, I think.
Okay. Do we have anyone from Geth? Not seeing anyone. Nethermind.
Implemented the pay opcode for DevNet 2. And yeah, not finished the DevNet 1. Still waiting on the creator contractors, because that's one of the major ones. What I was thinking is, would it make sense to do this as a new branch rather than working on the existing label for DevNet 0?
I think a DevNet 1 branch would make sense.
Yeah.
Why wait on the creator contract status? You can implement DevNet 1 still without it, or just you just want to wait. It's more final.
Oh no, I was just clarifying in this meeting what the details of it were. There's a lot of docs with EOF to go through.
Gotcha.
All right. Rep.
No updates. I still didn't start work on DevNet 1.
Oh, I missed this in testing. My goal is to try and get some level of contract, some level of EOF DevNet 1 by next week. So we can, if not the full transaction chest, at least we can get most of the container changes. So we can validate those.
Would that mean we should leave the current creating in there?
For
Or
now, yes.
should we have transaction creating?
I think we can't remove the current create mechanism until we have the EOF creation contract in place.
Yeah.
So to answer some questions, that's why I still have it listed in the Mega EOF. Once we have it working in a DevNet, then I think it's fine to pull it out of SFI. Okay. Anyone from Solidity? Not seeing Camille. Anyone from Viper? All right. Any other compiler or client team updates that I missed? Eels.
Eels.
Yes, Eels.
Yeah,
Let me add Eels to the list.
Yeah, so for us, we are implementing the TXCREATE right now, and pay opcodes would be the next thing. So TXCREATE is work in progress.
And what's the name of the branch that you're working off of?
It's EIP's Osaka EIP 7692. EIP dash 7692.
Okay. And has that had a recent rebase onto the
Yes.
tip of Eels? Okay.
Yes, yes.
That's what I've been waiting on. Great. I'll play with my fuzzer and see how it works with the new stuff. That's good news. All right. I will work off this list next time so we can get everyone without me having to ask again. Okay, is there anyone else that I've missed? Cool. So I guess the rest of the call. Go ahead.
I have a question. So I see that many different clients are implementing DevNet 1 and DevNet 2 variants and different branches. So the question is, should we have in the test release, should we make a distinction between DevNet tests? So for example, have a flavor of DevNet 1 tests and another one for DevNet 2 tests, or is it too complex for clients to consume these tests, these different tests? It's possible in East to do this. Is not free, so we have to do some work to make this possible. Maybe I think create a different fork of but yeah, is there appetite for clients to consume different variants of the tests, or is it like just not worth it?
Clients' opinions?
I'd risk to say that it's not worth it.
I don't think it's worth it either as well. So they are kind of version, so one after the other. I don't see why we would be running DevNet 1 or DevNet 0 tests after it's finished. Right?
Thanks. Yeah, makes complete sense. So yeah, I think we should, at least in the release, we should make it clear that this is targeting DevNet 0, and in the follow-up releases, just make it very clear that it's targeting DevNet 1 and so on and so forth. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Here's a wild card question though. What are the odds that pay is going to be available to uncontainerized code? I know it's essential for EOF, but I'm wondering how much pressure we're going to get to make it available outside of the container.
Is that a question for testing or just in general?
Testing in everyone. I mean, that could impact testing because then we could test the pay opcode outside of the EOF testing code so clients could still validate it without having to run it inside a container and wait for DevNet 2.
From testing perspective, I think we can plan ahead and just try to put effort into looking of ways how we can parameterize efficiently inside
Okay.
and outside of the container, if container. So I think it's a nice thing to have in mind, just to make sure that if the decision is made, we can just flip a switch in the tests and just test both inside and out of the EOF container.
Okay. Yeah. So that's just something to keep in mind. I don't think there's action on it yet until I think next week's, not tomorrow's, but next week's ACDE call, I think, is where the call for that might be made. So
I'm not sure if it's a good argument, but including it in legacy sort of increases the scope for this change because it needs to be analyzed, with backwards compatibilities, whatnot, maybe. And also it that needs to be tested with interactions with the old legacy calls. Probably maybe creation as well.
okay.
And it's not really, I don't know, what's the gain of having pay opcode in legacy?
Because some people really, really want it. Is the short answer.
Does it really, really apply to legacy as well? Because it
Right.
for sure applies for EOF. I'm not sure how
I think EOF, it was more than really. I think it addressed a security concern. I don't think it addresses the same security concern outside a container.
Are we continuing to add new features on the legacy VM once the EOF is shipped?
That's a discussion to be had. My thought is to limit it to only container codes, but honestly, that's going to be a function of how well community uptake is. If community uptake is amazing, that's going to be an easy sell. But I think there are some features on tap that I think people are going to want to use outside a container. The create delegate opcode basically does 7702, but for contracts, I think is one that there's going to be a lot of pressure to not have container only. So it's going to be to the call, but I think going to the future, I think that's going to be the default. So we can let code outside a container ossify and code inside of containers where the evolution would happen. Yeah, and we could use that as kind of a carrot to encourage people to use EOF. But there's going to be some features that will require EOF, like the current formulation of EVM Max needs, for efficiency's sake, it needs immediate opcodes. Doing all those with pushes, we immediately lose all of our gas efficiency. So that's going to be one of the reasons for EVM Max to be container only. And as far as EVM Max, the current limitations we have in EOF for backwards compatibility, I don't think will matter because almost all EVM Max contracts I see is doing one cryptographic function very well and not doing any fancy DEX type stuff. So it lines up pretty well with that feature. I honestly don't see anything that uses EVM Max really calling outside of it for the first few major contracts to come out of it. Okay. So let's move on to DevNet 1. I think based on the client implementations, implementation is mixed. Lacking somewhat on tests. Is that a fair characterization of what was stated? So I think the two big features are TXCREATE and the initcode transaction and the creator contract. We had a little bit of discussion earlier. Like I said, I need to get on the list. My plan is to first advocate. Actually, I tried this 6 weeks ago, and what we got was round two of should we do EOF or not. But I wanted to raise the question of 7877, I think it is, EVMify the identity precompile, and get the opinion of everyone in the all core devs if pre-deploys are a thing we want to do. And I think that the precompiles are a different kind of pre-deploy that I think may be more palatable rather than arbitrarily deploying contracts and arbitrary addresses. Because then we might get asks like, well, can you deploy my stablecoin? Can you deploy my main coin? And I think the answer to that is going to be a resounding no. But I think what the difference that the EOF has, the EOF creator contract, and the precompiles is that those exist as precompiles already and have a limited EIP-driven use. So whenever we discuss this, we're probably going to need to get lists of standards of what's acceptable to pre-deploy and what's not. EIP 999 is of course going to be a third rail. That's going to be an absolutely not. We don't change contracts as part of a pre-deploy. But I think this is the exercise that we're going to have to do on all core devs. And I'd like to have the discussion without it turning into round 3 of we should do EOF. So I'll see how I can approach that. Any ideas, comments on the pre-deploy, how we might want to do that?
Is a pre-deploy from our perspective the recommended option?
Is
Like excluding all the ACD considerations and politics.
what was the question again? I missed it.
Do we prefer the pre-deploy over a precompile? Technically speaking.
So it makes gas better. It makes it obvious how much to charge for gas because it's the opcodes and we exercise the opcodes in place. So if we go pre-deploy, we're going to have to figure out a gas schedule too. If we
Good
go
point.
full pre-deploy.
We need to code and spec out the bytecode would be the spec for the pre-compile, but I think it makes the task to do this correctly harder for the clients. And we want to avoid precompiles. And we would not be able to delegate call it, right?
Yeah, you're right. If it's a pre-deploy, ext delegate call will fail.
So we prefer the pre-deploy, I guess.
An ext delegate call, I think, is something that's a subtlety, but it changes the source address for where you're going to get all of your contracts off of it and has a different distribution of the addresses that, in effect, only your contract can reliably use. So that is a valuable security feature.
Yeah, we had a discussion that we ended up softly preferring to not block ext delegate call for creation purposes. So pre-deploy is better. So how about we just code it and write a test for it and then propose it and trying to make a case for it that it's the cleaner solution. And also you can make a point about gas because that's a very good point and burden for the clients. I think it's worthwhile to.
So here's the question: do any of the clients have existing code to deploy contracts as part of a fork transition to add to the state? What's the fork transition code look like in the clients? Dragon?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest difference. If we add it as the contract, that means that we need to update the state. I think everybody that's synced from Genesis with DAO hack fix has some part of code that updates the state. If we add it as precompile, that means there is no bytecode and there is no like state change. But for implementation standpoint, it may be because I'm assuming here, but that precompile needs to have subcalls. For example, in REVM, there is no support for that, and it would be a little bit bigger change. So there is like pros and cons around that. It seems the easier solution is to add the code to the state. But I'm not sure if we are going to get the pushback of, I'm not sure, pushback on changing the state with the hard fork.
Yeah.
What
To be honest,
if?
I would
Sorry.
prefer the bytecode to be included in the state. Seems cleaner, to be honest. Even with the pushback
Despite
that
the
we get.
difficulties, right?
Sorry?
Sorry. Despite the difficulties that you have mentioned.
Yeah. Difficulty is mostly like pushback from community or persons or people.
Okay. And how about would it be possible if that introduction of the creator contract be handled by running bytecode on the fork? Maybe that's a bit early to.
It doesn't matter. It will be if this special transaction or special bytecode that is run or something else, there is some logic that needs to be run. Be that in the end, it needs to include the bytecode. So in the end, those like examples are just implementation detail.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I mean, that's another way we could do it is we could put it in a special transaction. And we could have a list where the clients have these lists of special transactions. If they match this hash, don't check the signature. The signature is presumed.
Well, it would also need to work around if it does a transaction. I mean, it depends on how special you want it to be, because we also had the 35 EIP 3541.
To be honest,
Go ahead.
It feels the special transaction will just complicate it, because you need to define what special transaction is. You need to add somehow preserve that special instruction. EDN just saying at that block, you need to insert this bytecode at this address. It's basically what we need to do.
Well, we run system contracts on before and after block, right?
True.
So we can have a system contract that, or something resembling the system contract that is run just before or after a specific block. Would that be a good abstraction to introduce it?
I think this case is very specific and that we don't need additional abstraction. Just saying at this block, you need to insert this bytecode is good enough to insert in the state.
I mean, if you do it as a system contract, you're going to be checking at every single block. Whereas if you say, is this bytecode active, then you're only going to be doing it on transaction create calls. So there's less weight from doing it on, checking whether it's active. When you call transaction create, rather than checking every block, should I insert the system transaction?
Gotcha.
Okay. Any more that needs to be said on the creation transaction for now? I don't think we'll get much resolution today. So on the initcode transaction, one thing I do think we need to look into, this is probably more for Epsilon and whoever's working on the fuzzer, is we need to have the TXCREATE transactions in the TX fuzzer to make sure that we can generate valid ones. Yeah.
So it's to fuzz the transaction or fuzz the instruction?
Fuzz the transaction. So there's we need to make sure that the transaction format is stable and reliable. Marius has Marius and Martin have a set of transaction fuzzers that they run. They've been running against the blob transaction, the 7702 transactions. So we just need to get a generator that will try and do bad things to the init code transaction. Starts with valid transactions, then it goes to invalid transactions. That's probably something that we can start looking into after we get the east tests out. Any other questions about the create operation itself or the init code transaction? Okay, anything else about DevNet 1? Any questions about the container spec changes that we're going to be rolling out? So I've said this before, but I want to reiterate it. If there's any breaking change at all that needs to be done to the container, we probably need to do it now. The goal is that no more breaking changes after the container. So what that means is after this is we can do additive changes to the container, which would be things like adding new sections, the metadata section being an example of how that might happen. But in the future, things like EVMX may benefit from an extra section. There may be, I have no idea what other magic code section types people might want to have. I know 7701 account abstraction wants to add a section header that says, here is the list of entry points that we're going to use for account abstraction and which section to go into. So that's having account abstraction depend on EOF is really helping facilitate a lot of things, to be honest. So the idea is that they can start working from DevNet 1 without needing to wait for DevNet 2 features. And then we need to get the tooling outreach done. I've asked a couple of times on Foundry, I need to get a contact. I've been trying to get a hold of Foundry via our Epsilon ref chat to get their feedback on the current TX create design. But other than that, it's once we get DevNet 1, I think it's going to be stable for them to build their changes. And we'll need to get in contact with Hardhat and make sure they have the ability to do what we have there. All right, DevNet 2, pay opcode. EOF only has one question. Okay, any other? Go ahead.
I have a question about the static. Should we allow that static context? And in what cases? So if there is no value being sent, or it's being sending to the same recipient as the sender. I think, yeah, since logs, this is not explicit in the EIP.
What are people's opinions on this?
Fail would be easiest.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think on that note, I think because we are doing logging, right, on the pay opcode.
I don't think we are, but we may in future.
Yeah, so static calls don't do logging. So that would be a case for failing. Yeah.
Okay. What's going on with my keyboard?
Yeah, because there's an EIP for logging on ETH transfers, which we don't do at the moment, but it would cause a problem.
So aren't calls with zero value also going to generate logs, or are those explicitly removed from logging?
That's true, they're probably allowed, aren't they? Don't know. But I mean, that's sort of call with zero value, because the way to transfer is with call. And you couldn't really ban it as zero value, because then you wouldn't be able to call them.
Mm-hmm.
But pay opcode is intentional, so I think it's fair. You know, why are you calling pay if you're not? Because you're not actually executing anything on the other end. There's another issue that needs clarification, which is what happens in failed case. So if the sender doesn't have enough balance, so is that an assert fail where it consumes all gas, or is it like a call opcode where it returns 0, 1?
How does call, not ext call, how does call work?
It returns a code.
Yeah, I would keep it consistent.
But consistent means a different thing in EOF with ext call and legacy with call, for the error code at least. Should it behave, I mean, assuming that it will be rolled out in legacy, would it behave differently into context? That sort of might be even an argument against doing it in legacy.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think those things need to be updated to the hey, what is pay's number?
59 something 5920.
5920.
Yeah, and there's some discussion on the magicians.
So we should probably get changes this, because I think we also need a change. I think the opcode also needs to change. What opcode did we use?
I think it was the one just before the M, like EF or something.
You mean the hex FC?
OXFC, yeah. And that doesn't conflict with anything we have right now, right?
No.
Okay.
This seems to not have a return code.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It needed clarification. There's some discussion about it on the ETH magician.
Okay.
So these points have been mentioned on ETH magicians. No conclusion.
I mean, it's probably up to the authors of the CAP to figure it out, right?
I think we need to get someone on here as an author on it. I don't think any of Gavin, Zanian, or Sam Wilson are regulars on this call. So since it's already got some changes in there, I think we should get someone in here because we're going to start making functional spec changes. So whoever edits this next should add themselves as an author.
Yeah.
Who
Do
is the official champion of the CIP?
you want to check the?
That's one of the issues we have. That someone is putting the IP for consideration, but there's no official group that actually is championing it.
Oh, is ETH magicians not working?
This is why I'm using HackMD. It had a rough weekend. I think it's under provisioned right now.
Yeah. Okay. These points have run up in there, and there's a little bit of discussion. I think it's like Charles, and yeah, here we go.
Yeah, I think William should add himself as the committer. He's the one driving a lot of it this year. Okay. He's usually pretty responsive if we ping him in the forums. He doesn't always make calls, but I think we could get these added. All right. And nobody's worked on symbolic introspection or metadata sections yet? Okay. So let's post EOF DevNet 2. Let's start with this one because there was a request from Dragon to discuss this proposal.
Yeah. In general, I think we already talked about this maybe months ago, but while discussing EOF, I was referenced this how to split of how to fraction subcalls, subcall gas. So I made the AP so I can reference that. Main idea or maybe difference is have a field inside the interpreter that's going to be set when the opcode is called. Opcode represents a fraction of current gas when that opcode is called. And that fraction or gas that gets split is used as the gas limit inside subcalls. That basically solves the problem where all the gas can be transferred to the subcalls, and subcall can revert and spend all the gas.
Okay. And no returns, one input?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's some details there, but that's like the general idea. Alternative to that was to have split saved and the gas limit for the subcall getting calculated when the subcall happens. But that would mean that first subcall would take an amount of gas, second subcall would take a different amount of gas, and it will depend on how much gas got previously spent. So this feels a little bit nicer because you have one value that you can get at one point of time.
And this would be just in the call frame. Subframes would not inherit this.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And you call just one opcode. It doesn't disrupt anything with EOF. It's one opcode and everything else is done in the background.
Okay.
Yeah. I need to have something because this kind of problem where when you proxy something, when you're breaching something, and when you want to limit the amount of gas that subcall can spend, it popped out in discussion a few times. Yeah, Ben?
Yeah.
So I don't think this is ideal, but I do think it's better than gas introspection, and it obviously solves a problem because there's like the risk of bricking a contract that this would solve if if you're always calling something that reverts, you can't get past it.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I think this solves the problem. I think it's better than full gas numeric, because that's, especially if we're considering repricing all the opcodes, a numeric lulls you into a false sense of what it's going to do. If you say you can only have 21,000 gas and then we reprice everything to one gas, that protection goes away. Whereas this doesn't imply that protection. It's more like you can continue after. So I think it's good from that. I don't. So yeah. So I think it's both better than EOF as it is. I think it's better than gas introspection as it is. But it does with
It's
the
kind of
acknowledgement.
strange,
Yeah,
to be
that feels
honest.
a bit clunky.
Yeah.
So
Especially
we
where
had.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Especially where you are like taking the current gas when that top code is called. That's strange. At the beginning and even now, it's strange to take that because it's arbitrary. But seems slightly better than taking it at time of when the call is basically called. But I don't have anything better than this, to be honest. But
Okay.
yeah,
I got
either
3
way, this is
minutes.
okay.
I would add a max that it can maximally be 63, 64 would be my only change on that.
Okay.
Okay.
That makes sense.
What if there was magic values, like something greater than 65K that means use the stipend value and that could change on a schedule? That would be like my suggestion.
What do you mean by that? Sorry.
So sometimes when people do calls, there's like some magical schedule values that must be preserved and must be added, and that they've been using for things like Solidity to say past 21,000 because it can't do a store. What if we put in a few of those magic values and then we could change it with the schedule?
That's interesting idea.
Okay.
Basically say that this value, whatever it is, it will be changed with every hard fork that changes gas pricing for this opcode. Or
Okay.
something like that.
Yeah,
That's
that would work.
interesting.
Cool. Well, I've got another meeting, so I'm getting kicked out of the conference room. So I'd like to thank everyone for calling in. I think we got some good progress. Hopefully in 2 weeks, we'll have ETH test and some success with clients getting much further into DevNet 1. I appreciate everyone's time.